Candidate Carly Fiorina from drawing big crowds, particularly when she's in New Hampshire. But the introduction now pretty much over, and it's time to start making the case. And there are no shortage of issues in this race. And Carly Fiorina is my guest this morning. Good to see you.
Good morning. Nice to be with you.
Congratulations on making it official. How's everything going?
It's going really well. I really appreciate the people of New Hampshire. They take their citizenship responsibilities very seriously. And so it gives me an opportunity to talk about why I'm running and why I think our nation is at a pivotal point and why I think we need something and someone different in Washington, D.C. now.
Why do you think, because your message, I mean, you are crowds and you're seeing some movement in the polls. Why do you think your message appears to be
to a point where we have a professional political class that's more concerned with the protection of its own privilege, power, and position than it is with doing the people's work? And so I think people now say, as I do, it's time to return to a citizen government by, for, and of the people, which means citizens like me have to step forward and run for office, and it means citizens such as here in New Hampshire have to be willing to give someone who's not a professional politician a chance to run for the highest office in the land.
I mean, every cycle it seems like, you know, it's like there's for a window, a period of time, there's an appetite for someone with a background in business and not the professional politicians, as you put it. All the way back to Lee Iacocca. Let's get him to run for president. And then that kind of wanes as we get closer to election day. Do you think it'll be different this time around?
Well, I have to do my job, but I have to continue to meet people. I have to continue to talk with specificity about what I would do, which I have been. But no, I don't think this is going to fade. I think when you have 82% of the American people who think we have a professional political class, when they look to Washington and see festering problems that have been there for decades under both Republicans and Democrats. I mean, we could pick the festering problem of the Veterans Administration, the festering problem of the IRS, the festering problem of the border that's not secure. People look to Washington and they see a lot of talk, but they don't see a lot of problem solving, and that takes leadership.
Let me ask you one issue that's big in the Republican field right now and has drawn some distinction between the candidates, particularly when it comes to Rand Paul. The Patriot Act, NSA, surveillance. Where do you fall in this argument?
You know, I had the privilege of chairing the advisory board for the Central Intelligence Agency for several years. And in that role, I've done a lot of work with the CIA and the NSA. And I know that these are fine people who are focused on protecting us. But I also said to both agencies while I was in that role, you need to be as transparent as possible with the American people about what you're doing and why you're doing it. So on the one hand, I hope that the NSA and the CIA will be more transparent over time about why Section 215 is necessary. I don't think it's helpful to move those responsibilities for data collection to the telephone companies. I don't think that solves anything. And I do think the arguments over the Patriot Act are typical of why people are frustrated with politics. How long have we known this act was going to expire? 4 years? And suddenly it all came down to the last minute as usual, a lot of grandstanding on many people's parts. We rushed to the end, and there wasn't a really satisfying solution from anyone's point of view.
So are you in favor of the Patriot Act as it stands now, or do you think there needs to be modification where it provides some more oversight into the CIA or the
Well, I do think more oversight is required, and I also think that we've learned a lot since September 11th. We've learned a lot about our enemies. We've learned a lot about technology, which has evolved. We've learned a lot about what the American people think about what these agencies are doing, and so I support these agencies' need to protect us, but I also believe that they need to be as transparent as possible and modify as we go along, as we learn more.
All right, let's change topics now, talk about gun control. Obviously, this is an issue just about in every race, but particularly this time, given some of the things that we've seen in recent months and in the last couple of years. When it comes to this, and here in New Hampshire, it is a big issue, the Second Amendment. What are your thoughts when it comes to the Second Amendment rights versus trying to come up with some sort of idea to curb the violence?
Yeah. Well, I'm a very strong supporter of the Second Amendment, and I think if you look at the facts, what you'd see is the cities and states with the most restrictive gun rights laws are also the cities and states with the highest violence. One of the things that happens, unfortunately, is politicians, particularly on the left, in all honesty, will exploit tragedies to try and pursue their ideology on gun control. And of course, every time we have a tragedy, someone else steps forward and says, this is an issue about the Second Amendment, when Usually, unfortunately, it's an issue about mental illness, or it's an issue where someone was in trouble, people knew they were in trouble, and they didn't or weren't able to notify the right authorities. In many cases, the fixes that were pushed by politicians wouldn't have prevented the tragedy at all. And so I think we ought to enforce the laws we have. If we're really concerned about a culture of violence, we need to look at our culture as well, a culture that seems to celebrate violence and sexuality at every turn. This is a big issue, but I don't think we're going to solve it by curtailing Second Amendment rights of law-abiding citizens.
Are they legitimate topics, though, in a presidential race when you talk about social topics?
Yes, of course it's a legitimate topic. All the things that concern the American people are legitimate topics of conversation in a presidential election. I think, however, what citizens want to hear is real conversation about these complicated issues. I think when politics gets down to sound bites hurled between one side and the other, and nothing ever really gets talked about so we can come forward with a solution, it's why people are frustrated.
A lot of Republicans, pundits, analysts, viewers feel like, and I mentioned it just a moment ago, that you represent the best counter-argument that Hillary Clinton has, largely because, you know, you're a woman and you haven't pulled any punches when it comes to your critique of her. Do you like that designation, or do you think that that's a little unfair and it doesn't give you the due respect that you have as a legitimate candidate? Many people believe that you're really becoming.
Well, first, I find it interesting, actually, that people think I'm criticizing Hillary Clinton because I'm a woman or because she's a woman. My critiques of Hillary Clinton have nothing to do with her gender or mine. My critiques of Hillary Clinton have to do with the fact that I think she will be the nominee of the Democrat Party. She is therefore who we have to beat, and she is not trustworthy. That's what the majority of American people now believe, and she doesn't have a track record of leadership. Yes, she's held a lot of titles, but you know, leadership has nothing to do with title. It has nothing to do with position. It has to do with solving problems. It has to do with making tough decisions. It has to do, most of all, with unlocking potential in others. And so if the Democrat nominee were a man, I would be critical as well if their track record deserved such criticism.
Sure, but there are those, I'm not saying you criticize her because she's a woman, but because you are both women, you're better able to criticize her, and it's not so much of an issue. Like you can say more than another Republican.
Well, I would say this. If I face Hillary Clinton on a general election debate stage, there are certain things she's not going to be able to talk about. She's not going to be able to talk about being the first woman president. She's not going to be able to talk about the war on women. Gender won't be on the table. What will be on the table are the issues, the problems that we need to solve in this country, the potential that we need to unlock. What will be on the table is the difference between her approach and mine. What will be on the table is whether or not we need yet another professional politician, and honestly, Bill and Hillary Clinton personify the political class, or whether we actually need to return to a citizen government. I think that's the ground that elections should be fought on, and I also think that that's ground that I can win on.
Sure.